Before you embark on this deeply moving journey of unexpected connections and profound redemption, make sure to subscribe to our channel, like this video, and comment below with where you're tuning in from. Your support helps us share more stories that inspire and heal. The Nanny's Secret, a widower, his silent child, and a past unveiled. Imagine being pregnant and alone, desperate for a new start. She takes a job as a nanny for a bitter, cold, and solitary widower, only to discover a secret from the past that will change everything. An unexpected connection, a hidden truth, and a destiny she never could have imagined. In a mansion cloaked in silence and grief, a lonely child becomes the bridge to a love that defies expectations, forcing a broken man to confront his own hardened heart. Do you believe the past always finds a way to return? Stay until the end. This story will move you to tears. A cold welcome. The rain wasn't falling. It was punishing. It poured down as if each drop had been sent with the intention of breaking anyone caught in the streets. Sarah Vance clutched the strap of her bag to her chest, as if that could protect not only her body, but the last shred of dignity she still possessed. She was soaked to the bone. Her shoes made a squelching sound with every step. Still, she walked quickly, as if being late was worse than failing. She stopped in front of the iron gate of the house. No, of the mansion, a gate that looked more like a wall. She swallowed, took a deep breath. Water ran down her face as if she were crying without permission. There, at the entrance to a world that wasn't hers, that perhaps never would be. Sarah hesitated for a second. Then she pressed the intercom. Name? A mechanical, almost bored voice asked. Sarah Miller. I'm here for the nanny interview, she replied, trying to sound firm. Though her teeth chattered slightly, the gate opened with a low groan. She entered. Every step down the long, perfectly paved driveway seemed like a silent accusation. The garden was meticulously pruned, symmetrical like a hospital. No toys, no sign of childhood, not a single sound. The door opened before she could knock. On the other side, an older, dry woman in a dark uniform examined her from head to toe with a neutral gaze. Sarah noticed the slight wrinkle of her nose at the sight of her wet clothes. Follow me, she simply said. Sarah entered, feeling that she was already indebted for being there. The living room was cold, not from temperature, but from the absence of life. Everything too clean, too orderly. Expensive, empty armchairs, heavy curtains, and that silence that chilled you to the bone, the kind of silence that seems to demand you whisper, even your thoughts. He was there, the man, sitting in a leather armchair, leg crossed, eyes fixed on a folder in his lap. He didn't stand when she entered. He didn't smile. He didn't offer a good afternoon. He just lifted his eyes with a controlled movement of his face, like someone evaluating an object that has arrived late at an auction. You're late. His voice was low, firm, almost clinical. Sarah tried to justify herself. The rain and the bus, I left on time, but... He raised a hand, cutting off her explanation like a knife. I'm not interested in excuses. The profile I'm looking for isn't someone who's late. She swallowed. But if you'll allow me to explain, I have experience. I've cared for children full-time. The position requires more than experience, he interrupted, closing the folder. It requires stability, discretion, absolute commitment. It doesn't seem to me that you can offer any of those aspects. The phrase didn't come with anger or arrogance, but it hurt more than if it had been shouted. Sarah lowered her gaze, clenching her fingers together. She felt her hair clinging to her face, her clothes sticking to her body, the weight of the entire world on her shoulders. She wanted to beg, plead, kneel, but something in her, perhaps pride, perhaps exhaustion, wouldn't allow it. I just need a chance. He stood up. This isn't charity. This is work. Good afternoon. She didn't respond. She just nodded, her face burning with shame. She turned, walking slowly towards the door. She felt tears wanting to mix with the rain still running down her body. She thought about the electricity bill, the overdue rent, the eviction notice waiting for her like a death sentence. In reality, she didn't even know where she would go after this. She put her hand on the doorknob. "Miss." The small voice came from behind. Sarah turned around slowly. A little girl, no more than 5 years old, stood in the middle of the room, in light pajamas and a stuffed animal in her hands. She had huge, dark eyes, straight hair pulled back in a low ponytail. She didn't look lost, just determined. Without saying anything else, the girl ran across the rug and launched herself into Sarah's arms. The force of the gesture was so sudden that she had to crouch down to keep from falling. And then, that tiny, fragile body wrapped its arms around her neck with desperate affection, as if she had been waiting for that hug for a very long time, as if that hug was the only thing in the world that still made sense. Sarah froze, and then she felt the lump in her throat break completely. "Lily." The man's voice behind her sounded more surprised than annoyed. He didn't know what to do. He didn't move. He just stood there, static, his eyes wide. Because for 7 months, his daughter hadn't hugged anyone. Not even him. Not the doctors, not the teachers, not the previous nannies, all dismissed in a few days. But now, there she was, hugging a stranger. A wet, trembling woman, smelling of the street and broken hope. Lily said nothing. She just rested her head on Sarah's shoulder, as if that were the only safe place in the world. The man took a deep breath. He ran a hand through his hair. And then he spoke, with a voice colder than before. "Stay." Sarah looked at him, still kneeling with the girl in her arms. "What?" "You can stay." "For the girl?" "Not for me. I don't trust you. But she's never done this before." Lily closed her eyes. Sarah pressed her lips together, trying to understand what was happening. But she said nothing. Because perhaps, for the first time in a long time, she had a place to sleep that night. But the roof came with a silence that hurt. What do you think is the significance of Lily's spontaneous hug to Sarah, given her history of not embracing anyone? How does this single act immediately change Julian's decision and his perception of Sarah? Share your insights below. A house of echoes, Sarah walked down the mansion hallway like someone walking through a cemetery. Every step sank into a floor too clean, as if no one truly lived there. The walls were high, white, without photos, without color, without a visible past. There was the smell of expensive cleaning products, but no sound of a home. The only noise was the faint clinking of her own wet footsteps, muffled by the thick carpet. Lily ran ahead, with the carefree abandon of someone who still doesn't understand the weight of the world. She laughed softly, in a way that seemed almost sinful in that sterile environment. Sarah noticed that the girl didn't look around, as if she knew every inch of that space, and, at the same time, as if nothing there truly belonged to her. The housekeeper, an older, stern woman named Maria, showed her the room. It was small, but clean. It had a dark wooden bed, a built-in wardrobe, and a high window with heavy curtains. Bathroom at the end of the hall. Meals are at set times. No guests, calls, or outings without Mr. Thorne's authorization. And then, as if already tired of the little she said, Maria closed the door. Sarah slowly sat on the bed. The mattress barely sank, more comfortable than anything she had slept on in months. The silence swallowed her thoughts, and for a few seconds she just breathed. For the first time in days, she breathed. But peace didn't come. She looked at her hands. They were red and swollen from the cold, but still trembling. She thought about the envelope she hid among her clothes, the final eviction notice, the bank collection, the handwritten message in the margin that said, "Last chance." The debt still existed. The problems still followed her. Only the setting had changed. At dinner, the discomfort was palpable. Julian entered the dining room with the same presence a general would have before his subordinates. His suit was impeccable, his gaze distant. He sat at the head of the table, opened his newspaper, and didn't say a word. Lily was to his left, Sarah to his right. 3 plates, 3 sets of cutlery, but no sound. Sarah served the girl, then herself, and hesitated as she approached him. "May I?" she asked politely. He didn't look at her. "Already served." It was like a slap. She recoiled, shrugging, and returned to her place. She tried to focus on Lily, who ate calmly. The girl watched her with big eyes, like someone who still doesn't know what to expect, but wants to believe. Julian remained silent almost the entire meal, until, at one point, when Sarah picked up her knife to cut the girl's chicken, he raised his voice coldly. "Use the correct cutlery. This isn't a boarding house." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. She looked at her own fingers, confused. Everything was correct, but still, she felt wrong. She didn't respond. She just nodded, holding back anger, pride, and fear in a bitter knot in her throat. After dinner, she collected the plates and took them to the kitchen. Maria didn't help. She just watched from afar, with eyes too old to judge, but too accustomed to forgive. That night, the silence of the house seemed heavier. Sarah put on the simplest pajamas she had and lay on the bed. Lily slept in the next room. The hallway was dark, but suddenly, an old melody filled the air. Softly, almost whispered, coming from somewhere in the house. A Spanish song, with old lyrics. A song from another time. A woman's voice. Sarah got up. She left the room barefoot, her feet touching the cold floor. She followed the sound through the gloom to the main hallway. The music was coming from the living room. She approached step by step, as if she could peek without being noticed. And she saw. Julian was there. Standing, his shoulders hunched. The old record player spun slowly, releasing that melancholic voice. He didn't see her immediately. His back was to her, and he was hitting the wall. Not with fury, with desperation. His fist hitting hard, again, as if physical pain was the only way to silence another pain. Deeper, profound. Sarah froze. Her shadow trembled, her body rigid, muscles tense. He was a broken man, facing an emptiness no one saw. The wall didn't react, but he kept hitting it, as if he needed to feel something. Anything. "Mr. Thorne." Her voice came out weak. He turned abruptly, his eyes moist, his jaw clenched. "What are you doing here?" he asked harshly. She took a step back. "I heard the music, I thought." "It's none of your business." The tone was sharp, but hesitant. Sarah slowly felt it, and she turned to leave. But before reaching the door, she stopped. "The music. It's beautiful." He didn't answer. But when she was already far away, climbing the first steps of the staircase, Julian looked up. He looked to where she had been. For long seconds, he stayed there. Static. And he wondered, irritated and confused. Why on earth did she care? What do you think is the significance of Julian's silent act of punching the wall while listening to the music? How does Sarah's simple comment about the music being beautiful affect him, despite his hardened exterior? Share your insights. A crack in the armor. Julian found no answer that night, nor in the following ones. Sleep came in fragments, as always, only now there was a new kind of uneasiness. Something small, annoying, that moved inside his chest and couldn't be explained logically. He tried to continue as always, methodical, functional, unbreakable. But something about the presence of that woman, that drenched nanny who dared to interrupt his silent morning, seemed to have left a crack. Small, invisible, but real. The next morning, Julian left early to take care of business at the office. He left clear orders, discipline. No unnecessary conversations, strict schedules. But Sarah didn't listen to orders. She listened to children. Lily was sitting on the terrace floor, her gaze down, slowly playing with an old toy that seemed never to have been used. The sun streamed through the heavy curtains, creating a rectangle of light on the rug. There, within that golden beam, Sarah saw an opportunity. "Have you ever played with bubbles?" she asked, crouching beside the girl with a knowing smile. Lily looked up. She didn't respond with words, but she didn't pull away either. Sarah brought a bucket with warm water, mild soap, and a cloth. She gently squeezed the mixture until light, consistent bubbles formed. Then, she dipped her fingers, ran them over a blank sheet of paper, and, as if by magic, began to draw. Circles, stars, snails, a smiling sun. Lily watched with growing attention. Curiosity is the first step before affection, and Sarah knew it. "Try it," she offered, extending the foam to her. The girl hesitated, but her fingers touched the next bubble with an almost reverent care. She slid her fingertips over the paper, timidly. She drew something that looked like a fish, or a leaf, or a piece of a soul trying to express itself. Sarah laughed softly. "It's beautiful." Lily looked at her. For a second, her eyes shone with something that looked like pride. Sarah then purposely exaggerated, putting foam on her nose, making a funny face. Her eyes widened, her mouth contorted into a ridiculous smile. A clown without makeup. Lily's eyes opened wide, and she laughed. It wasn't a timid sound, nor a small laugh. It was a clean, free, loud laugh, the kind of laugh that lifts the weight from your shoulders and brings air back into your lungs. The sound traveled through the room, went up the stairs, danced among the furniture, and reached the hallway. And then it froze someone. Julian, who had returned early, was just a few steps away. He stopped, motionless. He listened, and he felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. That sound, that laugh, he hadn't heard it in months. Not like that. Not with that intensity. He closed his eyes. He felt an unexpected surge in his chest, as if something was about to break. His throat tightened. His heart beat faster, but it wasn't anger. It was nostalgia. It was the memory of another laugh, more mature, more feminine. Another laugh that once resonated through that house. A memory in a woman's voice. And then the tears came. He didn't ask for them. He didn't know how to stop them. They were simply there. Silent, masculine, unacceptable. They ran without permission, like everything truly felt. Sarah didn't see him. She was busy laughing too. Lily imitated her, now drawing a cat's face, then a dog, then something only children understand. "Is that me?" Sarah asked, pointing to a round blob with crooked eyes. Lily nodded, smiling. "And you?" Sarah pointed to another. The girl paused, looked at the drawing. Then, she touched her chest. "Me," she said, in a low voice. It was the first word Sarah heard from her mouth. She froze. Her eyes instantly filled. She said nothing. She just leaned in, slowly, and rested her forehead against the girl's. There, amidst bubbles and soap, was something that not even grief could kill. Julian saw the scene. He couldn't bear it. He turned and left. Quickly. The sound of his own footsteps bothered him. He went up the stairs as if fleeing a fire. He entered his study and locked the door. The house, for the first time, was alive, and he didn't know how to deal with that. In his study, he ran his hands through his hair, then over his face. He sat at his desk. He tried to write something, review documents, return to the world of contracts, where everything is predictable, logical, controllable. But his eyes burned. The memory of the laugh still floated in the air. The image of his daughter, smiling, drawing, speaking, with her, with Sarah. He picked up a pen. He wrote her name several times on a notepad. Sarah? Then he crossed it out. Why did that name bother him so much? Because she asked for nothing. She demanded nothing. She didn't confront him. But somehow, she invaded. She invaded his thoughts, his silences, his home. And worst of all, she touched his daughter like no one else could. It wasn't control. It wasn't technique. It was too human. And that weakened him. For the first time, Julian felt fear. A small but real fear. Because Sarah didn't confront him with words, but with presence. With that firm care, without flattery. With the way she saw the dead corners of the house and didn't avoid them. And with the way she made Lily laugh. Alone, with still trembling hands, he rested his head on the desk. And he stayed there. He didn't sleep. But he didn't cry again either, because something more dangerous consumed him now. He wanted to hear that laugh again, but he didn't know how to ask for it. And so, the next day, Julian kept his distance. He pretended not to see his daughter's drawing taped to the refrigerator, a crooked scribble of 3 intertwined hands under a smiling sun. He pretended that the sound of laughter no longer resonated in the house. He resumed his routine like a soldier returning to the battlefield, not knowing if he truly wanted to win. But the tension, though suppressed, grew in silence, like an invisible crack running through the marble. What is the significance of Lily's first spoken word, me, after months of silence? And how does it affect Sarah? How does Julian's emotional breakthrough in the hallway challenge his long-held emotional barriers? Share your insights. The looming threat. Sarah noticed it. She felt it in his restrained gestures, in the sudden absence of footsteps in the hallway, in the way he avoided meeting her gaze, even when they shared the same space. But she also knew how to keep silent. She carried a world within her chest, and there was no room for new wounds. She cared for Lily with more tenderness than anything else she had done in her life, and that was what kept her going. That afternoon, as she put the girl down to rest, Sarah's cell phone vibrated on the dresser. The number was unknown. The screen pulsed. She hesitated for a second, but answered. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was low, muffled, but sharp. "The deadline's expired. If you don't pay by Friday, the next visit will be in person, and we don't just knock on the door." Sarah went mute. For a moment, she thought she had misheard, but the threatening silence on the other end confirmed. It was real. The debt, the names, the past, everything was back. She hadn't left anything behind. She had just hidden it for a few days. She hung up, her hand trembling. The world spun slowly. The edges of her vision began to darken. She took a deep breath, but the air wouldn't reach her. A buzzing started in her ears. Her throat closed. She staggered to the hallway, leaning against the wall, as if every inch forward required double the strength. She was halfway to the stairs when her legs gave out. Julian appeared at the top of the stairs. At the exact moment she fell to her knees, one hand on her chest, and her gaze lost. He came down in 2 long strides, crouching in front of her with a startled expression he couldn't hide. "Sarah, what's wrong?" She tried to answer, but her breath came in short sobs. Her hands clutched his coat, as if something was trying to tear itself from within. Julian held her by the shoulders, firm yet gentle. "Sit down. Breathe with me. Like this. Slowly. You're here. With me. It's over." He led her to the sofa. He laid her down gently. The silence of the house now seemed to contain the sound of her heart beating too fast, and his trying to keep pace. She closed her eyes. She didn't want him to see what was coming now. The collapse. The breakdown. The absolute vulnerability. "Sarah," he said, in the lowest voice he had ever used with her, "what's happening?" She didn't respond. She just squeezed her eyes shut, like someone holding back tears with their soul. He sat beside her, and for an instant, he just watched her. There was something in her that wasn't just exhaustion. It was fear. Real fear. Not the kind that comes from a nightmare, but the kind that hides behind a door, waiting for the right moment. "Are you running from something?" he asked. His voice was dry. Direct, but there was a different weight behind it, as if this time he truly wanted to know. Sarah took a deep breath. She slowly opened her eyes, and she lied. "No." She tried to smile, the worst kind of smile, the one that fools no one, a fragile laugh like glass about to shatter. Julian looked her in the eyes. Her eyes said what her lips couldn't. They were at war. Full, cloudy, tired. She wouldn't be able to hide it for long. "Sarah," he began. But she interrupted him. "I just didn't sleep well. That's all. Sometimes my body reacts like this. It'll pass." Julian remained silent. Inside, something tightened. He knew how to recognize a lie. He had lived long enough to notice when someone tries to survive with the strength of a facade. She wanted to stay. That was clear. She wanted to be close to his daughter, even clearer. But she was always alert. She looked over her shoulder when going out to the garden. She jumped when the phone rang, and now she fainted in the middle of the hallway, as if her body was saying what her mouth kept silent. He leaned back on the sofa, crossed his arms. "You don't have to tell me anything now, but at some point, you're going to have to tell the truth." Sarah didn't respond. She just nodded slightly. But inside her, a whirlwind was forming. Because it was no longer just about her. It wasn't just her body in danger, or her name wrapped in threats. Now she had something to lose, something that hurt just to imagine. Lily, the only one who reminded her what it felt like to be part of something good. Julian stood up. He stopped in front of her for a moment. His eyes were hard, yes, but there was a kind of silent sadness in them, like someone who recognizes, without admitting it, another's pain. "If someone is threatening you," he finally said, "don't try to carry that alone. This isn't a boarding house, but it's not a prison either." She looked up, and for the first time she saw a glimmer of true care in his coldness. Julian left without saying anything else. He went up the stairs with heavy steps. He left behind the echo of something more dangerous than anger. She mattered to him, and that complicated everything. Sarah remained lying down, her body still tense. She picked up her cell phone. The number of the recent call still blinked on the screen, like a digital scar. She knew the past wouldn't let go easily. But for the first time, there was someone willing to see, even if he didn't yet know how to handle it. And perhaps that was the beginning of her downfall, or her salvation. What do you think the debt Sarah is hiding truly signifies, beyond just financial strain? How does Julian's discovery of her vulnerability and his offer of help mark a significant turning point in their relationship? Share your insights below. A quiet promise. That night, Lily drew 3 places on the table with crayons, 3 crooked circles, 3 plates, 3 chairs. And in the center of it all, a word she was now beginning to pronounce frequently. Stay. Sarah smiled. She took the drawing and put it on the refrigerator with a flower-shaped magnet. The gesture was small, but it said everything she didn't dare to verbalize. She wanted to stay. Despite the past knocking at the door, despite the debt, despite the fear, Julian noticed the scene from afar. He stood at the kitchen doorway, hands in his pockets, his gaze fixed on the drawing. When Sarah perceived his presence, he averted his eyes and cleared his throat, like someone trying to hide what they feel. She insists we have dinner together, he said, with no apparent emotion. And you? She responded carefully, testing the limits of that moment. I don't usually change routines, but sometimes it's worth it, he ventured. He looked at her for a second longer than necessary. Then he nodded, almost imperceptibly. At 7, in the dining room. Sarah didn't know if that was an invitation or an order, but she accepted it as what she needed most, a breach. At 7 o'clock sharp, the table was set. The atmosphere was still the same as always, cold, silent, full of hidden memories in the 2 clean walls. But Lily smiled, and that was enough to warm the space. Sarah served a simple dish, saffron rice, vegetables, and chicken in a mild sauce. Nothing sophisticated, but there was something there that no expensive recipe could offer. Intention. Presence. Julian sat last, observing every detail in silence. He didn't comment on the aroma of the food or the arrangement of the cutlery, but he didn't get up. And for Sarah, that was already a beginning. Lily sat between them, lively. She pushed her plate towards her surrogate mother and pointed to the chair beside her. You sit? The word came out firm. Clara, as an order from someone who knows that the world only makes sense if those people are close. Julian froze. Sarah swallowed hard. The last time she had heard that word, spoken that way, with that tone, it had been in another context. Another man, another place. And it ended in abandonment. But she sat down and ate. And the silence between the 3 gradually became comfortable. This food reminds me of my mother, Sarah said, looking at her plate. She didn't plan to speak, but the words came out. I was 12 when she died. My father stopped eating, stopped living. So I learned to cook, to keep the house standing, to keep him standing. Julian listened, without interrupting, without judging, his face serious, but attentive, as if, for the first time, he wanted to know more than she let slip. We didn't have much, she continued, but every time I made rice the way she did, it felt like she was there, for a moment, as if the smell stopped time. Lily stopped eating. She rested her head on Sarah's arm, as if she also understood that this wasn't just a meal. It was a ritual. After dinner, Julian slowly got up. He looked at his daughter, asleep on Sarah's lap. He said nothing for a moment. Tea? He asked. Sarah hesitated, but nodded. They went to the smaller living room. the one he rarely used. More intimate. Warmer. The lights were soft, the sofa comfortable. A jazz record played in the background, discreetly. Julian served the tea with a naturalness that didn't match the man she had met days ago. "Loneliness," he said, sitting in the opposite armchair, "isn't what I imagined. I thought it would be peace, but it became a prison. After his voice failed, after my wife died, the house filled with noises no one hears. The paintings, the cutlery, the rooms, everything started to scream." Sarah held her cup with both hands. She didn't interrupt him. I tried to stay in control, in routine, in work, even with Lily. I thought if I pretended everything was fine, at some point it would be. "And did it work?" she asked, without provocation. "No, I just distanced myself from everything, and everyone." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was dense, human. Sarah took a deep breath. Then she said, almost in a whisper, "My son's father left me when he found out about the pregnancy. We had been together for 6 years. He said he loved me, but he wasn't prepared for anything beyond himself. The day I told him, he just looked at me, packed his things, and left, as if I had told him it was going to rain." Julian didn't respond, but his face hardened, not in judgment, but in indignation. "I never imagined seeing myself in a house like this," she continued. "But sometimes life pushes us to places where there are no choices left, only survival." He moved a little closer, his dark gaze fixed on hers. "And now?" She bit her lip, not knowing what to answer. "Now, I don't know." He reached out. He touched hers, slowly, without urgency, without haste. Sarah instinctively pulled away. The contact ignited something she spent her days trying to extinguish. Fear? Guilt? The feeling that she didn't deserve tenderness, not with everything she was hiding. She withdrew her hand, not with rejection, with caution. Their gazes met, and what was left unsaid was there, whole. Julian understood. He didn't insist. They remained silent for a long time, but in that silence, there was no escape. Something was beginning, and both knew it. They knew that the world that existed between them had changed its tone. The routine was no longer automatic. It was intimate, detailed. Julian began to notice the small things, the way Sarah tied her hair when she was concentrating, how she hummed softly when she thought no one was listening. He even noticed how she closed her eyes for a second before responding, as if measuring each word to avoid overflowing. Sarah, for her part, no longer needed to protect herself so much. The tension in her shoulders had lessened, not disappeared, but slowly dissolved. The fear was still there, like an alert animal, sleeping inside her. But now there was a counterpoint, a presence that offered something akin to a refuge. Lily continued to be the bridge between the two, but now it was her joy that set the rhythm of the house. Mornings were soft, coffee smelled of peace. Sarah prepared pancakes on Sundays and left cut fruit in colorful bowls on the table. Julian appeared in the kitchen with an unshaven beard, the newspaper folded under his arm, and stopped just to observe. "Isn't it too sweet?" he asked one day, tasting the syrup Sarah was preparing. She raised an eyebrow. "Can I put less next time?" "No." He took another piece. "It's perfect." That was the kind of dialogue between them now. Nothing extraordinary, but loaded with meaning. Small concessions, unspoken kindnesses. A silent language made of prolonged glances and contained gestures. Lily, with her precise innocence, read it all. One day, seeing Sarah wipe the corner of Julian's mouth with a napkin, she made a carefree comment. "You look like a movie." Julian cleared his throat. Sarah smiled, and they said nothing. The nights became slower. They were the time when everything was revealed, even if unspoken. After Lily fell asleep, the small living room sofa became a refuge. Sarah and Julian talked about movies they had never seen, about books they started and didn't finish, about cities they might someday visit, alone or together. "You look lighter," he said once, stirring his teacup. "You too," she replied. "Only you, light, still wear a tie." He laughed. It was rare, but sincere. "I don't know how to be any other way. I didn't know you knew how to laugh, and I didn't know anyone could still make me laugh." The silence that followed was warm, comfortable. But that night, unlike others, silence wasn't enough. There was something in the air, like a long-awaited expectation about to be fulfilled. Their bodies were close, their legs almost touched, their gazes no longer fled. Sarah wore no makeup. Julian had taken off his shoes at the entrance. Nothing was rehearsed. Everything was inevitable. He raised his hand, gently touched her face. His thumb traced her cheek like someone caressing a memory. "If I kiss you," he whispered, "I won't be able to turn back." Sarah closed her eyes. Her voice came out in a thread, without resistance. "Then don't." The kiss happened unhurriedly, but with urgency. It was a kiss full of scars, of losses, of mutilated hopes. A kiss that asked for nothing but surrender, just for that night, just for that instant. There were no promises, no future. But there was truth. Sarah thought of nothing else. The world outside, with its debts, threats, fears, didn't exist. Only that moment existed, in his arms, a pause. And she needed that pause, like someone needs to breathe after almost drowning. When their lips parted, neither said a word. There was no need. Sarah rested her head on Julian's shoulder. He naturally put his arm around her back, and so they stayed. For as long as it took. How does Julian's personal confession about his loneliness affect Sarah's perception of him? What is the significance of the first kiss between Sarah and Julian? And what does it reveal about their unspoken connection? Share your insights below. The past catches up. The next day, everything seemed different, but not in a dramatic way, in a subtle way. The light in the kitchen seemed more golden, the table more alive. Lily drew smiles on colored sheets and taped them all over the house as if marking territory with happiness. Sarah sang as she washed dishes. Julian read the newspaper, but with each page he turned, he glanced over the paper, observing her with a care almost impossible to describe. He wanted to say something, but he didn't. She wanted to ask, but she didn't. Because there was a delicacy in preserving what they had, exactly as it was. A balance too fragile to be named. Sarah felt her chest light, but her mind restless. She knew that happiness was made of moments, and that, deep down, she still carried a time bomb in her purse. That debt, that call, everything still existed. But for now, she chose suspension. The pause, the right to feel. That afternoon, Julian appeared in the garden where Sarah was playing with Lily. "It's going to rain," he said, looking at the sky. "Then let's dance quickly," Sarah replied, twirling with the girl on the grass. He laughed, but this time he didn't stand and watch from afar. He joined the dance. He lifted Lily in his arms, spun with her in the air. Sarah laughed. The girl screamed with joy, and the world, for a second, seemed safe. At the end of the afternoon, when the first drop fell, the three were together on the porch, with wet feet and hearts beating a little more alive. It was there, under the rain that was beginning shyly, when Julian looked at her again. Long, and for the first time he thought, perhaps I no longer need to run. But he didn't yet know that the real storm was still to come. The house was too quiet. Lily drew in a corner of the living room, with colored pencils scattered around her, but without the enthusiasm she had before. Julian watched from afar, his gaze fixed on a random spot on the wall, not really seeing it. The laughter of the last week seemed like ancient memories, distant, as if they belonged to another life, a life he wished to preserve, but that now slipped through his fingers, unstoppable. Sarah, for her part, walked as if stepping on broken glass. Her eyes were more sunken, her face always alert. That old tension, which for weeks seemed dormant, now breathed behind her eyes. She had started sleeping little again, eating less, and she carried her cell phone everywhere as if it were a ticking time bomb. She thought about leaving, every night, every dawn. But Lily held her back. It was the girl's presence, the drawings taped around the house, the spontaneous hugs, the pure trust in those little eyes. That was what kept her, and perhaps also that man who now looked at her differently, though in silence. But no love protects from the real world. The morning everything came crashing down, Sarah went out to the garden to answer a call. She thought no one would hear. The signal was weak inside the house. She walked back and forth, speaking softly, trying to stay calm. I'm trying to get it. Just give me 2 more days, please. I'm not running. I'm going to pay. Maria, the oldest housekeeper in the house, watered the plants on the other side of the garden. She didn't approach, but she listened. Every word, every pause, every plea. She went into the house without saying anything. She stored the information like someone storing ammunition. Later that afternoon, Julian discreetly called her to his study. The door closed with a dry click. What did you hear? She was on the phone, with someone dangerous. She talked about debts, about threats. She said she needed time, that she was going to pay. She seemed desperate. Julian didn't react, not outwardly. He just took out his cell phone and dialed. Find out everything you can about her, he told the detective. Now, hours later, the report arrived. Sarah Miller, 27 years old, no criminal record, but with a heavy debt accumulated in recent months. Name mentioned in an informal investigation of fraud related to unpaid loans in others' names. Her brother, missing for almost a year, linked to a group operating illegal loans. Since then, recurring threats, frequent changes of address, unconfirmed accusations of concealing assets. The detective concluded with a warning. The investigation is still ongoing. There are dark points. There may be errors. But for now, sir, she seems compromised. Julian hung up. His heart pounded as if he had run. He couldn't wait. The pain of a possible betrayal hurt more than he was willing to admit. He entered the living room without warning. Lily was on the rug, coloring. Sarah was in the kitchen, cutting vegetables. We need to talk. Now. His voice was dry, icy. Sarah turned slowly. Of course, here. She pointed to the center of the living room. She dried her hands on the dish towel and walked towards him. Julian threw the envelope onto the table. Do you recognize this? Sarah didn't open it. She knew what it was. She knew what was coming. But still, her knees almost gave out. Can I explain? Explain? You lied. You hid. You entered my house with one story and lived another. There's a little girl who now trusts you, and a man who... He stopped. He closed his eyes. Do you think you can manipulate a child to hide here? The invisible slap hurt more than any blow. Lily stopped drawing, her big eyes frightened. Sarah put a hand to her chest. Her voice came out broken. "I never manipulated anyone. You're fired." "Julian, please." "Don't call me by my name." Sarah took a deep breath. She knew insisting was useless, but she also knew she couldn't leave like this, not without saying it. "You know nothing about me to accuse me." He crossed his arms, his gaze hard. "Then speak. Now is your chance." She took a step closer. Her voice trembled. "I inherited my brother's debt. He disappeared. And I was left. I was left with his name, with the guilt, with the fear. And then the baby came. Alone? No one wanted to help. I came here because I had nowhere else to go. I didn't come to deceive you. I came because I needed it. But I stayed, for her, for your daughter, because she needed me, and because her voice broke, perhaps needed you too." Julian didn't move. "Get out." Sarah looked at Lily. The girl stood up, walked towards her. "Are you leaving?" she asked in a tiny voice. Sarah knelt. "I don't want to, but I have to go. You promised you wouldn't leave me." Sarah swallowed a sob. "Forgive me, my love." She hugged her tightly. Then she slowly stood up, without looking at Julian. She took her bag. She walked out the front door like someone leaving a place where hope once dwelled. On the sidewalk, the night was dark, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't know where to go. And worst of all, she didn't know how to live away from the girl she loved, nor from the man who, though in silence, perhaps had begun to love her too. What emotions do you think Julian is experiencing after discovering Sarah's past and her brother's connection to illegal activities? Do you believe his immediate reaction to fire her is justified, or is it driven by fear and betrayal? Share your insights below. A desperate search. The first steps outside that gate hurt more than Sarah imagined. Every meter distanced her from Lily, as if something was being torn, little by little, from her body. The air was dense, as if the world itself knew that this farewell was not fair. The bag weighed on her shoulder, but nothing compared to what she carried inside. She walked through the silent streets of the rich neighborhood, her shoes echoing on a sidewalk too clean for her disheveled state. She didn't know where she would sleep. She didn't know who would still answer her calls. The money left in her pocket wasn't enough for a full night anywhere. She thought about going to the bus terminal, not because she had anywhere to go, but because it was the only place where no one asked questions. That same night, in another part of the city, Julian turned off the lights in Lily's room, closing the door with a care that tried to prevent a collapse. But he failed. The girl was crying again. Third night in a row. She refused to eat. She locked herself in her room, curled up among the toys she used to share with Sarah. She only agreed to sleep with Sarah's simple cotton t-shirt, forgotten in the haste of departure, because it carried the scent that made the girl feel protected. She repeated softly, almost like a hopeless mantra. She promised she wouldn't leave me too. Julian listened from behind the door, sitting in the hallway, alone, in the dark, his heart heavy as if he had swallowed stones. He didn't move. He didn't call anyone. He just let his head fall against the cold wall and stayed there. Guilt was an animal that came at night and bit without warning. He could fight everything, except what he felt. The next day, the housekeeper entered his study with a folder in her hands. "The detective left this, Mr. Thorne." Julian barely heard her. He took the envelope and opened it with anxious hands. The final report was there, cold, objective, ruthless. Sarah was innocent. The debt, inherited from a brother linked to criminals, she had been paying as best she could. The accusations of involvement were unfounded, based on conjectures and rumors from frustrated neighbors and creditors. She wasn't wanted. She had no record, Her name was clean, at least enough to prove that he, Julian, had been wrong. Terribly. He let the papers fall on the desk. His fingers trembled. The words wouldn't come. She just wanted a chance, and he destroyed it before listening to her. He jumped up, went to his daughter's room, knocked on the door, and entered. Lily was sitting on the floor, her eyes swollen, surrounded by sheets with drawings. Julian slowly crouched down. He picked up one of the sheets. It was him. Sarah, Lily, hands intertwined, a yellow sun and a red heart drawn in the corner. All the sheets, all of them, had Sarah. He closed his eyes tightly, trying to hold back the pain. "She didn't leave because she wanted to, honey." His voice broke. "It was me who kicked her out." Lily looked at him. She said nothing. She just turned her face away. Julian stood up. He took his phone, called the detective. "I need you to find her. Now. As fast as possible. Use everything. Her name, her number, her previous addresses. Do whatever it takes." "Any restrictions?" the detective asked. "Yes," Julian replied, his voice firm. "Don't scare her. She's had enough fear." He hung up. He ran a hand over his face. For the first time in a long time, he felt small, vulnerable, like someone who had everything, except what matters. On the street, Sarah waited for the bus at the station nearest the terminal. Her makeshift bags rested on the concrete bench, a half-empty bottle of water beside her, her cell phone silent. No messages, no calls. She picked up an old newspaper someone had left on the bench. She skimmed it for distraction. At the end, there was a job advertisement. Laundry. Part-time. No lodging. She sighed. The important thing now was to survive, and to hide. Above all. The last message she received was from an unknown number. "You can run, Sarah, but I know where to look. See you soon." She couldn't go back. Not now. Not with Lily so close. Not with Julian involved. It would be cowardly to drag them into the abyss with her. But in another part of the city, a desperate man sought redemption. Julian returned to the living room. He picked up his coat, his car keys. He stopped in front of the door, closed his eyes. He didn't know how to ask for forgiveness. But now, finally, he knew he had to. Because Sarah wasn't just someone he had let into his house. She was the only one who had managed to pierce his pain, dismantle his walls, make his daughter smile, and teach him that living wasn't just existing. And he had pushed her away with his own hands. Before leaving, he just told Maria, "If she calls, tell her I never wanted her to leave. Never." And he disappeared into the night, not knowing where to look for her, but determined not to stop until she knew that he too was waiting for a new beginning, even if it was one too late. What is the significance of Lily's repeated phrase, "She promised she wouldn't leave me too"? And how does it drive Julian's desperate search? How does Julian's discovery of Sarah's innocence and his remorse signal a profound shift in his character? Share your insights below. A new beginning at the bus terminal. The streets seemed longer in that uncertain hour before dawn, as if time had stretched the asphalt just to delay the encounter. Julian drove aimlessly, speeding through empty avenues, wondering at every corner if he wasn't too late. The detective called shortly after 3 a.m. "Mr. Thorne, we found her name on the boarding list at the central terminal. Bus to the countryside. Last departure, 4:10 a.m. Leaves in 20 minutes. Julian didn't thank him. He just hung up. In the rearview mirror, his eyes were red, his heart out of sync. Lily slept in the back seat, her face resting on the teddy bear Sarah had mended weeks ago. He woke her gently, but firmly. "We have to find someone, honey. Someone who promised they wouldn't leave you." Lily slowly opened her eyes, still sleepy. But hearing Sarah's name, she just nodded. The terminal was a mosaic of haste, loneliness, and dragged luggage. Sarah sat on a metal bench near platform 12, her backpack at her feet, and her fingers clutching her cell phone, where there were no new messages. Her face was pale, her body exhausted, but her eyes, though tired, were alert. She had bought the ticket almost without thinking. Anywhere but here. She didn't know what she would do when she arrived. She didn't know who she would be when she arrived. She only knew that she couldn't continue to be invisible or defenseless, not after having felt, for a few brief days, what it was like to have a place in the world. Someone who offered her tea without ulterior motives, a child who called her with affectionate eyes, a silence that didn't suffocate, but embraced. But all that was now memory, and perhaps it was better that way. Easier to bury hope than to nurture it without knowing if it would have anywhere to bloom. The loudspeaker announced the bus boarding. She picked up her backpack, threw it over her shoulder, walked. 3 steps to the stairs. 2. 1. "Sarah?" She turned. Time froze. Julian was there, and he wasn't alone. He carried Lily in his arms. His eyes were full of tears, but open, fixed on her. Lily's little arms clutched her father's neck as if holding a bridge about to collapse. Sarah stopped. "Don't go," he said, his voice breaking on the last syllable. She couldn't speak. He approached step by step, like someone crossing a minefield. His hands trembled, his eyes moist, his shoulders tense like someone carrying guilt. "I looked for you everywhere. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I only thought of one thing: finding you before you disappeared completely." Sarah squeezed her backpack strap. "Why?" He took a deep breath. He looked her in the eyes like someone revealing their deepest self. "Why didn't you destroy my family? You rebuilt it. You brought color back to a house that was gray. You gave my daughter her voice back. You gave me back the ability to feel, to want to stay. And you did all that, even when you were afraid, even when your world was crumbling." She felt her body fail her. "And when I needed it most, you turned your back on me," she whispered. Julian swallowed. "I was a coward. I hid behind a report, a judgment. But I know you, Sarah. I know it by how you look at my daughter, by how you listen to me even when I don't speak. You could have lied to survive, but you chose to protect." He knelt right there with Lily in his arms. "Forgive me, please. We need you. I need you." Sarah closed her eyes. For an instant, the world disappeared. The noise around her, the loudspeaker announcements, the hurried footsteps of passengers, everything vanished. Only the war remained there, inside her. Flee, return, protect herself, risk. "I have nothing," she finally said. "Nothing but a stained name, a life in pieces, and a child on the way." Julian slowly stood up. Lily now extended her hand. "Then let us be your everything." Sarah felt the ground disappear, the weight of the choice, the lightness of love. She dropped her backpack. It fell at her feet like an anchor that no longer served her. She walked towards them. She took Lily's hand, then Julian's. And there, in the middle of the station, between departures and reunions, she chose to stay. Not because it was the safest, but because it was the truest. And finally, after everything, she chose love. What is the symbolic significance of Sarah dropping her backpack at Julian's words? How does this final scene at the bus terminal mark a complete and profound transformation for all 3 characters? Share your final reflections.